The following is a paid advertisement of St. Anthony Hospital Orthopedics. References to any specific product, services, or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by St. Anthony Hospital, Carroll Broadcasting, or its advertisers. The views expressed by the host or guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Welcome to the St. Anthony Hospital Orthopedic Show with Dr. Richard Godding. Dr. Godding specializes in joint preservation, reconstruction, and replacement surgery, and brings over 25 years of orthopedic excellence to St. Anthony Hospital and to the Carroll area. For more information about Dr. Godding, his practice, or St. Anthony Orthopedics, go to santanthonyhospital.org or make an appointment by calling 712-794-5536.
Good Sunday morning, Iowa. It's Dr. Rick Godding. Thank you for choosing to involve me with your day today. It was winter's last gasp, it looks like. Of course, I'm recording this on Monday, the day after they were calling it a blizzard. I'm not sure I would call it a blizzard. I get the blizzard conditions because I was actually driving on Sunday afternoon, early Sunday afternoon. And it was definitely, I wouldn't say whiteout conditions, but it was getting close. And I only had a few more minutes to go when it started to get bad, so I was happy to be done with my drive. This week is scheduled, and you'll know by the time you hear this on Sunday, but we're supposed to be in the 70s, I believe. So it's that time, now you got to start thinking about mulching and weeding. And, there's one thing, I love spring and summer, but at least in winter when I get home, I can look out in the backyard and not just look at job after job after job that I need to do. And luckily I have some high school boys that I hire to come over and work with me. And, that way there's four of us, I can get, a lot done, especially since they're young and their backs don't hurt and those kind of things. So it's just that time. And I love planting the flowers and I love, all that stuff. But boy, my weekends turn into a whole lot of work on the yard, but it's nice. You're outside, you're getting some sun, and so I would suggest if you haven't gotten out that once the weather looks good, I'm always talking about getting out and doing some walking and getting some sun on you. It's that time. It's time to stop thinking about it and start doing it because I can tell you that the more I exercise, the better I feel, and I think that's true with everybody. I've been swimming, which I think I mentioned, kind of given the weightlifting a big rest because I just was starting to feel a little bit of pain in my hands, but I'm very sensitive about my hands, obviously. So I started getting a little bit of pain after some weightlifting, and I just said, you know what, let's just switch it up, give those hands a big break and swim. And I will tell you that swimming, man, I had forgotten. Back when I was in Hawaii, the high school had a pool and it was outdoors, so it was always a little colder, but it was always sunny too, pretty much. And the hospital was right next to the high school, so I used to go swim at lunch if there was no waves. Otherwise, I would surf at lunch. So it was a lot of that type of exercise, and I haven't really done that since I've been in Iowa. Obviously, there's not a lot of surfing in Iowa, so I don't do any of that unless I'm on vacation. We did do some surfing last summer in Mexico, but it's definitely getting in the pool. Man, when I'm done with that, like the next day, my whole body just feels better. I'm just a lot less creaky and seem to be moving better. So you might consider throwing in some swimming, and if you're not really in the physical condition to swim, a lot of these rec centers will have water aerobics, and that's a great way. So if you're going to start a regimen and you have been sedentary for quite some time, you want to start slow. And I think one of the best ways to start slow if you're going from zero, and I encourage you, don't stay at zero. Get up and get moving. It will help everything. But especially if you're carrying a little bit of extra weight, the water aerobics can be really great. Easy on your joints. You're getting the motion. You're getting involved. You're going to feel better. And it can snowball on itself. And hopefully it does for you if you choose to take this time of renewal in the year and get moving on it. And the one thing that I find that I keep repeating this, but if I have a patient who's 80 and healthy, my experience in my entire 22 years now of practice is that those patients walk. At least. Most of them just walk, once they're into their 80s, but even in your 70s, people are either walking, riding a bike, and of course then you have the farmers, and that's a whole different deal because there's so much physical to their job. And there are some jobs like that where there's so much physical to it that you don't necessarily need a lot of extra exercise, but a lot of other people don't. And then I think when people retire, oftentimes they become more sedentary. They think they're going to do a lot more, maybe fishing and hunting, and people end up watching a lot of TV or looking at their screens a lot. So break out of your screen, get out, and enjoy the weather, and walk consistently. And if you can't walk right now, try the water aerobics, get a exercise bike for your house, something like that. Because again, my whole medical specialty, surgical specialty, is getting people moving. And the whole idea of getting you moving is to increase your health. It's not just, you cannot take the knee in isolation, say, oh, this patient has, arthritic knee, so we're going to treat that. You can't just do that because there's a whole body attached to it. And the healthier that body is, the better the knee will do. And the better the knee will do, the healthier the body will be. So it's sort of a cycle. And the same can be said for hips, although hips are a little different than knees as far as the impact that the hip has on you. It can even be more debilitating than the knee if you just because people will, well, I don't know, I guess maybe a little bit. It's just either one of those joints goes out and you're having a hard time getting any kind of real exercise. So get your joints healthy or get them fixed would be my overriding message. And one of the things I wanted to talk about, because I had a patient ask me this question specifically about the robot, is, so we use the Mako robot, and if you've been listening for a while, you understand the Mako robot is the model of robot we use. It's the most expensive and the best robot out there. It is in a class of its own. There are things about it that none of the other ones have. Mostly, if you just look at it, it's this big, heavy piece of equipment that comes into the room, and there's a robotic arm, and I'm using the robotic arm to make the cuts after I've programmed in where I want those cuts to be. But somebody asked specifically a little bit more detail about what we call the haptic guidance. And so haptic guidance is the way that the arm responds to the boundaries that you have put in and to the anatomical boundaries that are already existent. And so what that means is if I want to cut the bone, because that's the idea, the bone saw, we cut the bone off and we replace the ends of the bone on total knee. That's what we do. And there are places you don't want to go with that saw. And right behind the knee is a large nerve and vessel. And you obviously don't want to get into those. I never have gotten into those even without the robot. So, but what's nice is the robot it will stop you like it feels like you're pushing, and then it feels like you're running into a rock or something because it just stops. And so what it has is it has a boundary around where you're cutting, so that specifically on the tibial side, that's the shin bone. That's where, because of the angle that you're cutting, that would be the place where your large vessel and nerve that live behind the knee. It's the tibial nerve and artery. It would be the place where that would be at most risk, and it's just impossible to get there because the 3D CT scan that's been uploaded into the robot knows where that vessel is. So the CT scan tells the robot where that vessel is, and the robot says, well, you're not going there. So that's nice. It's just a little bit, I talk about. So it's things like that. When I say to somebody that doing a knee replacement without a robot, which means you're using the metal jigs and you're kind of eyeballing and you're using a lot of art, it's a very more artisanal versus, a planned, mechanical, scientific way of doing it. And when I say it's more artisanal, there's just a lot of, you're kind of eyeballing things and yeah, that looks about right. And then you're making the cut, and then you're kind of releasing some ligaments until they kind of feel right. And then, but with the robot, you're locking in exactly where you want to cut based on this 3D CT scan. And then it's one of the things that it does is with this haptic guidance is it stops you from going places that you don't want to go. And so when I tell people that that a Mako robotic knee compared to a non-robotic knee is the same as driving a car today versus driving a car in 1984, which is or 1986, let's say, when I got my first car. And I got my first car, it was a stick shift, which you almost can't even get anymore. None of the dashboard was digital; it was all dials, and you had a radio with a cassette tape in it. And from a safety perspective, I'm not even sure I had airbags. I might have had airbags. I think it probably had airbags. But anyway, airbags were just kind of coming in. So from a safety perspective, you had your airbags, and that was it. Well, now most of the cars out there on the road that are produced today, number one, you have a backup camera. I mean, there is just so much safety. I don't know if there's any statistics about it, but I most certainly have seen people back over things and other people accidentally over the years before those backup cameras, and I think that they're a huge safety improvement. And you have you have over on your mirror, if there's somebody in your blind spot, you're going to see a little light on your mirror. Most of the cars. Certainly if you get a car that sort of has all the bells and whistles, which would be analogous more specifically to the Mako robot. So you're going to have a mirror that's going to tell you that there's a car in your blind spot so you don't get over. Safety, right? You're going to, if you get too close behind somebody, it's going to beep at you. If you're going out of your lane, some of the cars, many of them, will actually steer you back into the lane. If the car thinks you're going to sleep, it's going to make a noise, right? I think it's my wife's car or my car, one of them, where there's a little coffee cup that comes up on the dashboard and it says, do you need to stop and refresh? So all these things make it a safer ride. And then, of course, when you add in the GPS, it's more efficient because you don't have to remember when you used to pull over to the gas station and ask. Can you imagine pulling over to a gas station now and asking somebody for directions? People don't know directions anymore because, I guess maybe in a smaller town and you're not going far, but you used to pull over on the interstate and the person at the convenience store would be like, yeah, you're going to go 7 exits down and you're going to take a right. I mean, that stuff I haven't done it in a long time because I don't think anybody, you don't really need to because you have the GPS. So all of these things make your ride more efficient and safer and overall a better ride experience. And so that's the analogy with the Mako robot is it's a more efficient. Now, when I say it's more efficient, what I mean is the time that you're using in the operating room is more directed at exactly what you want to be doing. Now, it does take a little bit of extra time because you have to drill in to the bone a couple of screws in the femur, a couple of screws in the tibia, and you attach reflector plates to them, and those reflectors reflect back to the robot exactly where the knee is in space. And of course, there's some things like that happen in the hip. It's a different conversation because the operation's so different. But when it's now got exactly where you're going to be, so you do add that. You add about 10 minutes to the case. Now, to me, adding 10 minutes to the case for what is statistically speaking a 10% improvement in 10% improvement in patients who are either satisfied or very satisfied. So it went from overall everybody's getting 85%. That's what all of the historical data says. 85% of patients are, and that's where I was before the Mako, and now I'm at 95%. And all of the people that I know that use Makos have noticed a dramatic difference in how well their patients are doing. I noticed that myself, everybody that I've talked to. So you have 10% more people that are either satisfied or very satisfied and so that at 95%, I mean, there's not a lot of, there's not a lot of things out in the world that you can get a 95% chance that you're going to be satisfied or very satisfied with it. And hips are even greater than that because, the hips, they just tend to do better. You don't really see hips getting stiff after hip replacements, and there's problems. There are different things that can happen. Even using the Mako robot, there are different things that can happen that can make the hip replacement not function the way you want it. But there's a lot more give. It's a simpler joint, frankly. It's a true ball and socket, and that just makes it simpler. There's a lot fewer nuances to it. I'm not saying it's an easier operation. I think the operation is actually, it's just nothing I ever really did much of. The total hip replacements, I did a few when the Mako robot first got here, just to kind of, because we didn't have anybody doing them, and they did well, but I'm more of a shoulder and knee guy. So when Dr. Dirks came, that was one of the things. I was like, if you come, you can have all the hips. I don't want any of them. He was very excited about that because he's a wonderful hip surgeon and a wonderful knee surgeon too. But I've been primarily knees, so I don't talk as much about the Mako robot in the hip, but it is absolutely huge in the hips as well. It just allows you to put the socket exactly where you want it. The ball part you're kind of looking at, although it does help you measure the leg length, which is important as well. But on the socket part, man, there's a lot of ways that can go wrong, and they don't tend to go wrong using the Mako robot. So that's our sort of our daily dose of Mako, and I just, I do love using it, and I love that we're an all Mako hospital, and so that makes everything run smoother. What I try to do is we try to use the same equipment in all of our cases, so that there's, especially if you get into, sometimes in the bigger hospital, you'll have 5 different brands of total knees being put in, and 5 different brands of total hips, and 5 different brands of shoulders. And so we, Dr. Dirks and I, come to an agreement on what we want to use. Of course, he was, we had the Mako, and he liked to use a Mako, so that was easy. And but even for the sports medicine stuff, we come to agreement on what we want to use, and we try to use the same things, so that when the nurses are helping us in the OR, they're used to it. It's not, what's the nuance of this device versus the nuance of that device. We use the same devices so that the nurses, so everything's repeatable. So, and the more you repeat something, doing it the same way, the more the team gets better. So, yeah. So Easter around the corner, and spring is springing, and it is that wonderful time of the year when we're already, I think, seeing a few tulips, although they might not have liked that last little winter blast. But we are at the time of renewal and hope and good weather, and pools are going to be open before you know it, and then it's summer. So with that, I will leave you for the week, and be back next week, of course, and you just have a blessed week, Iowa.
This has been the St. Anthony Hospital Orthopedic Show with Dr. Richard Godding. For more information about Dr. Godding, his practice, or St. Anthony Hospital Orthopedics, go to www.santanthonyhospital.org or make an appointment by calling 712-794-5536.